As a reminder, the Crozet Community Advisory Committee is an advisory committee of the Board of Supervisors of Albemarle County. We do not vote to approve or deny projects. Our job is to provide feedback and input to the county on issues relating to the Crozet Master Plan.
Sir, I'm sorry, we can't hear you very well.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Try again.
Yeah, can we
Can the county provide, assistance for people who can't hear? I know that a lot of the venues, they have the mic and the hearing pieces. Is that available?
Not that technology.
I don't think we have that for this room. No, I don't think we have that for this room. Sorry, I can try to talk about it. Yeah, just great, thank you. So the Crozet Community Advisory Committee is an advisory subcommittee of the Board of Supervisors. We are all appointed as volunteers. None of us get paid for our service. We are appointed by the board, and our charge is to provide feedback and input to the county staff relating to matters involving the Crozet Master Plan. We will start the meeting as we traditionally do with introductions. It's always nice to know who's here. Again, I'm Joe Ford, the chair, and I live in the Highlands community here in Crozet.
I'm Allison Rabel. I am the community connector for this CAC. I am the staff liaison, and I live in the city.
Mark McKinney, I live over in West Hall.
Pastor Salvador, I live on 250. Mike Kunkel, I live in Corey Farm.
Sandy Hausman, Parkside Village. Mallory DePaster, Western Ridge.
Tony Murray, Planning Commission, Whitehall District.
Sugar Hollow.
Yeah, sure.
I am Allie Pesh, and I live by Wind Springs.
I'm Ann Malik, and I live in Earlysville, but represent you on the Board of Supervisors.
I'm Valerie Long, and I live in Old Trail.
Sean Bird, live off of St. George.
Michael Monaco, I live at Emerson Commons.
And it's always helpful for us to know who's here at the meeting, so if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, who you are, and what part of Crozet or what area you're in. Please.
Robert Mixed on the Brown Gap Turnpike.
Jay Hicks, and I live in Old Trail.
I'm Emily Kilroy, I work for the county.
Neil McGee, I live on the gravel Dickwoods Road.
And Diana Brawley, same.
I'm Terry Miyamoto. I'm here for the Crozet Trails crew, and I live in the Highlands.
Charlotte Mason, I live in Stonegate.
Debbie Messler-Little, I live in Yancey Mills.
Not helping St. George.
Kurt Carter, Western Ridge.
Ellen McBurney,
Ruth Weatherford, I live in Charlottesville, but I own property in Old Trail.
I'm Carolyn Anderson. I live in Old Trail.
Keith Rosenfeld, I live on Broad Axe Road in Ivy, right there.
Eric Schmitz, Western Ridge.
Jim Tolson, Good Springs, County Park.
Lee Silverberg, Old Trail.
Dick Nixad, Browns Gap Turnpike.
Jesse Mushkin, I live in Yancey Mills.
Tom Loach, John Gap Road.
Thank you all. It's nice to hear where everybody's from and see that we're all part of this community. Thank you for taking the time, for those members of the public to join us, and of course, members of the committee who give up their time to be here each month, again, on a purely volunteer basis. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate your input tonight. As you can see, our main agenda item a little bit later will be a presentation from our community connector, Allison Rabel, about the progress and future trajectory of the AC 44, Albemarle County Comprehensive Plan update. But before we get to that, we need to approve our meeting minutes. So I circulated the meeting minutes earlier. I hope you all had a chance to review them. If briefly, if there are any corrections or additions, we'll entertain a motion for those. If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes as distributed.
So moved.
Let's move to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Thank you. Further discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting minutes are approved. We will move into announcements and updates. As a reminder, this segment is intended to address any community concerns or other things that were brought up at a previous meeting, if there have been developments or updates. I believe Allison actually has an update on something that came up as part of the community concerns last meeting.
I do. So there was a concern in one of the neighborhoods in Old Trail about some, I think, kind of parking on the streets and or I think when schools let out children kind of crossing where there isn't crosswalks on the main stretch of Old Trail. And so there's a couple ways to, let's see if I can do this over here. Yeah. So there's a couple ways to kind of get these concerns addressed or at least questions answered. So one of the ways is, well, the main way actually is this lovely traffic safety concern form. And so you can put your information here and the location and when it happens and describe the concern. I'm not sure if the gentleman who had this direct concern is here again this evening, but if he is, this can help you. If he isn't, if you know that gentleman and you can share this with him, that would be great. But you can do this, and then the key with these forms are really, if you want to know more information, you need to leave your name and your phone number. This is like a similar form to, the county has one of these for zoning violations, but if you don't leave your name and or phone number, they can't get back to you and tell you if there was a violation or what the situation is. So you may not ever know what happened if you don't leave your information. The other thing that we're doing right now is these traffic town halls, and there's one for Whitehall and the Samuel Miller district. They are doing them 2 districts together, and so far have done Scottsville and Rivanna on Monday and Rio and Jack Jewett on Tuesday, but there is one for Whitehall and Samuel Miller if you are interested on Thursday next week from 7 to 8:30 at the North Garden Volunteer Fire Station, where there will be a presentation and then a Q&A session with representatives from the county, the police, and VDOT. And so that is kind of the update with that concern from the last meeting. And then I want to go back to the agenda.
And I'll just add one more announcement, which was last meeting we talked about some of the ideas that I had thrown out for meeting topics and items, and one of the ones was a hope that we would get back to sort of our previous tradition of having community groups coming and giving brief presentations, local civic organizations to see what was going on. We weren't able to line one up in time for this meeting, but in March we'll be hearing from the Western Albemarle Rescue Squad. Costas is going to let us know what's going on out there, so we'll look forward to hearing about what the rescue squad has going on, in addition to our normal agenda items of development projects and county updates. That brings us to our community concern session. So the goal for this is to have a short time and members of the public or members of the committee, if there are concerns about things in the Crozet area, we ask that you keep them brief to 2 or 3 minutes. This is sort of modeled on the open mic portion of a Board of Supervisors meeting or a school board meeting. So if you have small or concrete concerns, this is the time to raise them, and hopefully we can answer questions or address them, and then if they need a little more digging, hopefully it's something we can address or update at the following meeting. Are there community concerns from anybody on the board or in the committee or members of the public dealing with Crozet area issues? Yes.
Yeah, low volume commercial entrance at Crozet Elementary School.
I'm sorry, low
volume commercial entrance at Crozet Elementary School. So it is permitted by VDOT to limit the number of vehicles. The Albemarle County School Board, or the school system, and the county have been consistently violating the number of vehicles and have not taken any action to prevent that. It's 50 vehicles per day. And it's absolutely disgraceful that the county can't follow its own rules with VDOT.
And sorry, for those of us that aren't as familiar with you're talking about the number of people
The
taking their kids to and from
new
the
entrance to go in and out of Crozet School, it's a bus-only entrance. And so they used to have a gate. The county never operated a gate. They chose not to, even though they were required to. And that's supposed to limit the vehicles to buses the morning and afternoon rush hour. So they removed that gate. They have a new approval from VDOT just to paint lines to say bus only and put signs. However, humans are going to follow the path of least resistance. So people are going in and out of that because it's the quickest way to get to the fields in the back of the school. And it's unacceptable that the county is not following its own policies and the laws set forth under VDOT's handbook. when you contact the county, they say, oh, call the police department, as if they don't have enough things to do. So, that needs to get fixed and get fixed immediately. I've been trying to get that done for months now, and I'm sick and tired of the nonsense.
All right. Thank you.
And I've got a second concern as well. Yeah, so last summer, if y'all are familiar with the Dairy Queen, when that was built, it used to be Seals Exxon, and every day they sprayed off their parking lot, went down into our creek. So when the new Dairy Queen was built, we fought, and they were required to put in a filtration system. They were supposed to have it annually inspected. The county failed to require annual inspections. They actually said they didn't have to have annual inspections. So last year, I was walking in the rain. I noticed that none of the water was getting caught. I brought it to the county's attention. They repeatedly said that it was fine, not a problem. Well, finally, they got an engineer out there, and the engineering report actually verified every single thing that I said. And there's been pollution going into our creek for at least a year, if not up to 5 years. And again, that's an unacceptable failure by this county, and they need to clean up the creek.
What's the creek?
It's the unnamed creek, which we would love to be named Crozet Creek.
Okay.
Right, right. Right by the yellow one, right?
Other concerns from the members of the meeting? Yes, please.
Two things. I live on Hillsborough Road in Nancy Mills, and the speed is just crazy because of everyone going to King Family. Even though it's a short span of road, I don't know how people get, up to such high speed so quickly. But would that be in terms of like a speed bump or like the little things on the road? Would that be a concern I could bring up at that you just announced the traffic meeting, or is that something to talk about here?
You could bring it up at that meeting if you want to. I also think there's, besides potential zoning violations and potential traffic issues that would go to the police, on that, there's also a, it's a little tricky to pull up the form right this minute, because I don't. There's a reporting that leads you to the VDOT website, and if it's like a specific road issue, that may be a VDOT issue, which is why you could bring it up at that meeting, because VDOT will be there. But there's also a VDOT concerns form that we link to through the concerns tab. And I can show you that, or you may be able to see that on that phone, but I'm having some, trying to have a screen so I can see that.
I'll share that the VDOT the meeting next week is a really good opportunity to, like, reporting a concern is one way to share information, but you don't often get a full explanation back. And so if you go to that meeting, you'll hear from our planning staff as well as the police department and VDOT together about what some of the dynamics can be with some of these more challenging issues that I know folks have. So it is a good opportunity to kind of hear from everybody all at once, and then you get a nice robust answer back.
Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. Everybody's going to be in the room there. Police, VDOT, everybody. So that sounds like a great call for that. Yes.
May I just tag on to that, that if you're unable to get to the meeting, which is definitely not as wonderful as being there, please feel free and welcome to share your concern with me as well as turn it in, and then I can make sure to listen and make sure it gets covered.
Okay.
And I understand from staff that there will be a recording and all sorts of ways to catch up. It is a long way, but I really hope that people will make the effort to get there, because I think it'll be valuable.
Thank you. And just quickly, I mean, that's just the concern, the speeding there. And there's kids that live on the road, and animals, people. So just some kind of deterrent. We did have, for a short amount of time, the speed trackers, that say you're going this amount. But some people use that as like a challenge. So if they care about their car, you're not going to want to bottom out. So just figuring out some kind of concrete solution to reduce speed would be really, really helpful. And that's just the majority of it. Thank you. But then I did have another question. So with the whole AC 44 thing. Can we talk about a concern about that now or after you do your presentation?
I think that specific topic is going to be better for after. So we're going to let, Allison's going to present, and then there'll be time for a discussion after that. So,
Okay.
which we're actually going to get to right now.
Thank you.
Can I just add, I don't know where it goes on the agenda, but that, about the vacancies to this committee, is that on your list for today?
No.
There are 5 vacancies coming up next month, so all you folks should consider applying.
No, that's a great, yeah, we can ask them.
I think they have a couple current vacancies even that are
Yes,
like
so-
open.
but next month,
Pretty close
I'm
to, yeah.
out, guys.
Oh, okay.
That's an
And
excellent
Cassie's
point. Yes, so please, and I think that, maybe we can pull that up sometime. I can pull it up. There is an application form, I believe, you can fill out on the Albemarle County website. It'll let you fill out the form specifically for the Crozet Advisory Committee. You can select a menu. So please consider throwing your hat in the ring. And then you get to sit up here, which is not much different from sitting back there, but it's fun. Okay, that's the end of community concerns, which brings us to our scheduled presentation. Allison Mabel from our Community Connector will lead us through a discussion of where the comprehensive plan process has been and where it's going. And as we just mentioned, I think the best way to address this, because she is going to share a lot of information, and then we are going to have time for discussion. So I think we just sort of just listen to the presentation, and then at the end, when she finishes presenting, then we'll have plenty of time for discussion and questions at that point.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to give a high-level overview today of the county's comprehensive plan and the update process, which is called AC 44. We're also going to discuss current ways that you can share input and on this process and the community chat engagement kit opportunity. I'll also say this is my first time in many years doing a public presentation, so if I'm not loud enough or I talk too fast, feel free to let me know that I need to slow down or talk more. This just does not like me today. Let's see. If I go like this. It's trying to do two, but it doesn't like the two.
Very simple.
So the comprehensive plan, what is the comprehensive plan? So the comprehensive plan is a 20-year guide that describes the vision for the future of the county. It recommends how and where to direct growth and development, support local businesses, protect natural resources, provide for safe and reliable transportation, encourage variety of housing types. It also includes master plans, small area plans, and some other plans are being planned to be added in this update. The comprehensive plan is kind of part of other documents in the county, including the strategic plan, which is a 5-year plan that charts a course on how we're going to make near-term progress to achieve the vision with the comprehensive plan, and recognizing that it takes time to implement the comprehensive plan We plan out resource plans, funding strategies, and program development. The strategic plan is the path forward. And then the annual budget is how we're going to do that over the next 12 months to get things done to advance the strategic plan. It includes staff salaries, equipment, maintenance, renovations, new public buildings and facilities, and program support. And the comprehensive plan is collaboratively created with community members, staff, and elected and appointed officials such as the Planning Commission Board of Supervisors. And then the recommendations in the actual plan are organized by goals, objectives, and strategies for each plan topic. And then each level of those gets increasingly detailed. And the strategy level can include specific projects or infrastructure improvements.
How often is the comprehensive plan updated, and when was it last updated?
It's updated, it technically legally has to be reviewed every 5 years, but the county doesn't typically do a big update every 5 years, and as state law changes, which I think, do we not include that, but as state laws change, why is it being updated now is coming, which kind of addresses that more too, so we'll get there in this. So the comprehensive plan is the recommendations, the guide, and the county code is the regulations and the law, which includes the zoning ordinance in the county code. Why are we calling it AC 44? It's the name of the process because we expect to be complete in late 2024, and it's a vision for the next 20 years until 2044. There'll be periodic updates even within that time frame, consistent with the state code requirements and then changing conditions in the county as we've done in the past. So, why now? The state requires localities to have an updated comprehensive plan and to have one and to update it. The comp plan was most recently updated in 2015, and since then the county has continued to grow and change, and the plan content needs to be updated to integrate new plans and policies around climate change, housing, economic development, transportation, and others. And the county is kind of looking to streamline the document, which is part of it. If we can hold questions to the end, because I'm trying to get through this part in a kind of quick fashion, but we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion. So the project, there are going to be 4 project phases, and we're currently in phase 2. It just kicked off in January, and the project started with big ideas and visioning, and will end with the adoption of the plan in phase 4. And so phase 1, the results of phase 1 is the framework for an equitable and resilient community, which presents a snapshot of what the county strives to be in the year 2044, a community that has centered equity and resilience in its plans, policies, and actions. And the framework started out as 4 big ideas, which are listed here, and it was developed and refined with community staff, planning commission, and board input, and incorporates the board's initiatives for equity and climate action. It also builds a foundation for community support to come back to as the recommendations are drafted. And the full 4 parts of the framework are all on the project website, which we'll share the link to later in this presentation as well. The framework will be used to guide this current phase, phase 2 and phase 3, and then which will help update the plan's goals, objectives, and strategies. The steps for, this is a great picture of how it all kind of works together to update the goals, objectives, and strategies. The framework is serving as a guide for that. And then the steps for phase 2, we're currently in step 1, which is still a pretty high level part of this plan. The whole phase of phase 2 will last about the entirety of 2023. In step 1, which we're currently in, we're reviewing the policies from the 2015 comp plan, affirming the new structure for the updated plan, and developing a approach for planning toolkits. Community members are also being asked about challenges, opportunities, and priorities by plan topic, which builds on the feedback that we heard during the first phase. In step 2, we will be developing the draft planning toolkits, and we'll ask for community input on more detailed recommendations for land use and transportation and related topics such as growth management. Community feedback will be used to inform developing the toolkits. And then in step 3, we will continue to refine and develop the draft toolkits and to share updated policies, the goals and objectives for community review and feedback. And then the toolkits will continue to be refined. And so we're hoping to have updated goals and objectives for each of these plan topics in phase 2. And then public engagement. In each step, there will be different forms of public engagement. We currently have an online questionnaire that's open until March 10th. And there will also be pop-ups across the county where information will be shared about the comprehensive plan and topics. And we'll receive feedback as well. In step 2, we plan to have roundtable events and online opportunities for feedback. And then in step 3, there'll be open houses and another online opportunity for more feedback. And as each step completes, there will be a formal feedback summary for each that are available before the next step truly begins. If you can just wait, we're almost done with this. And so if you're interested, this is the website, engage.albemarle.org/AC44. There's 2 phase subsections as well, one for phase 1 and one for phase 2. There's the link and a QR code for that. So like I said, there is a questionnaire on challenges, opportunities, and priorities by plan topic that's open through March 10th. That is on this AC44 website. We're finalizing pop-up dates that will be available shortly on this website, as well as shared through the county's newsletters. And you can also host your own meeting using a community chat kit, which we'll talk a little bit about more in a second. And we don't have a lot of the slides for that. But if you guys have any questions, we'll do that before I kind of explain the kind of discussion activity that we'll do for a little while. But if you have questions about the presentation, we'll take that now. So I'm not sure, did you have a question, sir, about the presentation, perhaps?
Me or?
Yes, yeah, if you did, or if you'd like to share your question.
Yeah, I have 2 process questions. The first one is, say we have a 20-year master plan for the county, and then we have 5-year strategic plans. So Crozet just finished its in 2021, so my understanding that Crozet would do another master plan in 2026, is that?
So the master plans are, I think, about 10 years now that we're looking at.
I think part of the comp plan process will, so on paper it says that we will do the master plans every 5 years. I don't feel too embarrassed to say that we've not met that schedule. And if you were to map that out, you would see that we've not hit that target. I think part of the comp plan process will probably address looking at that. But master plans are sort of part of, they're chapters of the comp plan.
And the second part is, thank you, and I know that's tough, every 5 years it's a huge process, and you've got all these development areas, so I get that. But those master planning processes, my sense is they're constrained to some extent by the comprehensive plan and its visions and objectives. So I think the biggest constraint of the comp plan is what is the county's expected population growth over 20 years and what's its expected housing demand, right? So here's the question. At what point in the AC44 plan process are we going to review that?
So that, I think you're referring to the land use build-out document, and that's part of the documents that are considered during both phase 2 and phase 3. So there was a land use build-out analysis done. I think the maybe first one ever, or the first one recently was done in 2019. And then there was an update of sorts, but kind of the second iteration of that was done last year by an outside consultant, and it's I think a 70 or so page report, and that's part of kind of the other documents that will be considered kind of as part of phase 2 and 3 as the goals and objectives are, the draft updates are available.
So I'll just conclude, maybe this is one of those to-do tracking items, Joe, is if we're now in phase 2, and then this housing demand forecast is so important, I would ask that this group get an opportunity to review that specifically during phase 2.
It's a good topic. But I think, Eric, your point, I think one of the questions that's implicit in your, and this is actually, I think, an important question too. I think implicit in your question is the idea of, like, if we're talking about goals, right? Like, at what point in the process, right, you say, that's the number that we're trying to hit. We're trying to build enough houses for 162,000 people in 20, or whatever, in 20 years, and if that's our target, because a lot of other choices are driven by that, right? I mean, what the density is and where you build and how you build and how you move around is going to be dictated by that number. So I think, like, that's what I hear in your question is.
Yeah, that's a much more refined way of putting it. What is the population goal and housing goal over 20 years?
And I think that is critical. And when is that point set? And if I'm hearing you right, Allison, that point is not set. That actually, it seems to me, and maybe Eric, like intuitively, we might think that gets set really early in the process, but it sounds like it's actually going to be set later in the process. Is that right? Where you actually sit down and you say, this is our target number, and here's how we get there.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, and I will write that down.
They've already
But-
extrapolated the number. It's out there on the web.
I think one part of the question that I just want to respond to is that the comprehensive plan doesn't set a population target. It looks at population projections, and so the Weldon Cooper Center is typically the organization that we look at for what that's going to be. The consultants in the land build out analysis actually used a couple different sources to sort of zero in on a number that they expect the population growth to be. And then from there, it's really, so what are the housing needs that respond to the population growth that's going to happen? So the comp plan doesn't set a number of population, but it seeks to be responsive to what we think the community's needs are.
So it incorporates all of those findings you just talked about.
The comp plan incorporates those
And
findings.
so what I'm asking is, when can we look at those findings?
Well, the link is, we can send the link to the
I've already got it,
analysis.
I just want the larger group to see it.
Yeah, well, we can send that out. Yeah. It's on the website's not up there anymore. It's on the website though, so it is available for anyone to look at right now.
So my final comment, I'm sorry, I'll cede the floor in a second here. If we're looking for community engagement, it would seem to me that that really critical number is something we would start with and talking about.
Eric, just to answer your question from the county's website, they've estimated that there is enough land available for their estimated population increase for the next 20 years. So that's where they stand now.
Yes, this is probably a super ignorant question, but with this population number that's configured, like what relation, I know you said you had people who do the assessments, and that's just the projected growth, but isn't that growth kind of, or very much related to how much more land is developed? So if you're trying to increase population a lot, of course we're going to develop more and more land. But if we are not, bringing in much more infrastructure and just like too much, then wouldn't that number be down? Or, sorry, I did not ask.
Yeah,
that
so
at all.
the demographers that work for Weldon Cooper Center have the way that they do those estimations, and so we can share resources for how they do their work. I'll say that Weldon Cooper over a long period of time has developed a reputation of being really accurate when they look at the inputs that they feed into their model to develop those population estimates. And so if they look at plans that the university has for enrollment and for job growth, and so we can share sort of the resources that we have that sort of talk about how those population estimates are arrived at. But that, again, is information that we're getting from a body whose sort of purpose is to do that demographic analysis work. So that's not a number that the county is driving, that's a number that's sort of being developed through an analysis that they're, you know, sort of following best practices on how one does that. So it's not that the county is driving those numbers, it's an independent analysis that Wilton Cooper is doing.
But I think, sorry.
I guess I was just gonna say, like, yeah, that we're not driving the numbers, but I guess the decisions that we make will affect it,
Right.
you know, and whether it grows exponentially or not. So do we, I mean, is that what all of this is? Like, have a say in how much more development is, you know, going to happen?
Yeah, so I think one of the slides that we had, you know, it's the comp plan is sort of how do we want to grow, and what are the amenities that we feel like we need or are looking for as a community, and that's what this process is, to articulate those.
And then with your roundtables and like the community feedback, will dates for those things just be shared later?
Yeah, and I would encourage you, if you're interested, to sign up for the county's newsletters, and you can do that. I'm not sure if there's actually a link on the engagement website, but there's a link on the county.
There is, yeah.
There's a link on the engagement website, and there's also a link on the county website, and it will take you, one of the topics is AC 44, but you can also sign up for general news, or parks and recreation, economic development, so all kinds of.
I did it last week.
Perfect, great.
Last question. So in terms of the AC 44, like I just am late to the game, but I've seen that there's some like different proposals. You know, do the citizens get a chance to vote on which one we like, or do we just voice our concerns and then it's up to the board and the board of supervisors?
So I think you may be talking about the growth management options that had come out in the first phase. And so those will be used in this phase. Later in this phase will be discussed again. When they were discussed in the first phase, there was a realization of a need to kind of step back and go a little higher level than those, because a lot of people were confused about what those meant, and do you use them because they were options, do you use them together, are they all separate? So the growth management options are coming back later, and they may be different or changed or even called something different, but the growth management discussion is going to happen, I think later in this phase, but definitely later in the process again.
Do we get a say in what that is though, or is it just something that's decided and then?
You can give feedback on those initially. I mean, ultimately, all of this is decided by the board of supervisors in the end, but feedback on them. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to happen yet, and if it's kind of be like, I like this one, but I don't like this one situation. I don't think we've decided that process yet.
And the board of supervisors is not you guys, right?
Right, so the feedback is all driving sort of how we shape the plan that comes forward for consideration by the planning commission and the board of supervisors. And the board of supervisors are the elected officials that serve over Albemarle County, and the planning commission are appointed by the board of supervisors. And so they have, the planning commission makes its own recommendation, and then the board of supervisors ultimately makes a decision. But it's all sort of, the idea is the plan is shaped by the feedback that we receive along the way.
I think Tom or Matt, I think actually had his hand up originally first, so I'm sorry. We're going to go back to Matt and then we'll go to Tom.
Yeah, I think a couple of questions about public engagement. Can you speak to what sort of Spanish language engagement was done during the Crozet master plan, and what Spanish language engagement y'all are looking for in this plan? And then during the Crozet master plan, and I'll say master plan because it's not that, they did some pop-ups in Crozet, and county staff were afraid to show up where the residents of Crozet actually show up, such as, Peachtree Baseball or the farmer's market. Can you all make a commitment that you'll actually show up to where people actually are, so you can hear from the residents of Crozet? Or do you want to go back to the other method where you show up when no one's available and no one is interested in chatting? Because it's really important for you all to actually show up at the IGA or the baseball field or the farmer's market, instead of just showing up at Brownville at noon on a Thursday.
I mean, if you have ideas for where
Any of those
that'd be great.
locations would be great.
Yeah.
I think we had some, I think we had some of it translated. I wasn't as involved in the first phase as I am now, and I was not involved at all in the master plan. So I can't speak to the master plan. And I think we've had some of the documentation translated. I'm not sure if we've done, I know in the past they've done some pop-ups in like Southwood, for example, which has a lot of Spanish-speaking residents, but I'm not sure specifically about Crozet.
I would encourage the website to be available in Spanish.
The website has a translate button,
Okay.
which is increasingly how language access is being provided on the web. So that's sort of a standard practice that governments do. But we can come back with a response on what other language access.
And then fundamentally, right, the biggest problem with your public engagement is our GIS shop is unable to produce, anything that's very useful. It's very static. Again, we need to look towards Roanoke County and get websites and use the power of Esri to relay this information in a visually, a spatially referenced document. It needs to be maps, and they need to be high quality maps. What was presented in the Crozet master plan is not acceptable.
I think we're in the Tom and then line. Tom?
Yeah, I was going to answer a lot of her questions. I too had concerns about the options that were posted on the county website. To that extent, I put out a little web page called aboutcrozet.com, and I put a poll out there. And it's only been out for about a week, but I have over 150 responses already to your, to the poll, to the options. And I'd just like to go and let you know, but just give you some little feedback. As far as option one, which is explore opportunities to provide more density, more infill development in existing development areas, 7% supported it, and 92% did not support it. On number two, consider opportunities to adjust the maximum densities recommendations more closely with the historic alignment and build out patterns. That's, in other words, keep the patterns of development the way they are. That was supported by 86% and not supported by 9%. And the third one you have is to identify when and where and how the development area should be expanded. 90% of the people do not support the expansion of the growth area, and only 4% supported expansion. As far as development of non-residential around I-64 interchange, which is, as we know, is for us is 107, because they wanted to change that from rural to light industrial. That was also opposed by 80% and supported by 13. Many of you may know, we have our own light industrial site called Acme, which we're waiting for it to be redeveloped as a light industrial, and you'll be hearing more about that in the near future. On the fifth one is to explore the possibilities of a rural village within the rural areas, and 76% opposed that, 11% supported it. I think that mainly has always been the problem. We've talked about this before in the county. The problem has always been how do you support the sewer and water in the rural areas, and that's always been the problem. And number 6 is to evaluate current service provisions and consider if adjustments are needed to ensure equitable distribution of health and safety for both the rural areas and development areas. To be honest with you, 24% supported it, 33 didn't support it, and half of the people, like myself, didn't know what it meant. So, so I would just send a message that we should be learning. We just had our last master plan where the county forced a new zoning category in our master plan against the votes of the community association, against the votes of this group, and it was done without a vote by the planning commission. It was done without a vote by the board of supervisors, and it was done with no public hearing. And so we went from a zoning area from 3 to 6, now goes from up to 18 homes per acre. So I did another little study just to put this in another context. The population of Crozet now is 2023 is 10,322. Current population of Charlottesville is 47. Crozet is 3.7 square miles. The city of Charlottesville is 10.3 square miles. Therefore, we're 36% the size of the city. So if we look at it, our buildable, what's built already and what's coming here, our build-out population will be 16,136. Actually, it's interesting because it came out very close to a 2020 Crozet Gazette article which said that the build-out population would be 16,077. So if you look at 36% of the city's 47, it comes out to 17,091. So therefore, by population, when we build out, we will be, people-wise, we will be 94% people dense as the city of Charlottesville. I don't think Crozet was ever meant to do that. I don't think anybody would have approved it. And I don't think in the future that we would be, amenable to looking at even more density that the county wants to put on us according to your options. Thank you.
So I think there's been a lot of confusion, particularly about phase one. Even as a planning commissioner, I felt a little confused by it in the sense that when it was clear that phase one was complete, it was really geared towards addressing growth management, equity, and resilience. And the document that produced really feels like a mishmash to me. And it seems like it brings up a lot of issues, none of which are actually resolved. And as you stated, there's going to be a lot more conversation about each of those three topics, as there should be, particularly growth management. But there are inherent philosophical issues that are raised in there. For example, in the rural areas, growth management, one of our key elements of the growth management plan is that we do not provide services to the rural area. That's one of the ways that we prevent growth in the rural area. And yet, a lot of the document was talking about providing more services to the rural area. So there's some inherent conflicts there in terms of what that document was saying. The other challenging thing for me was seems like on the planning commission, we would provide comments and feedback on a lot of documents that came forward to us, but we would never get a red line document back saying, and here's how we responded to your comments, and here's the things that are changed in response to what we heard. And so that was troubling to me, and it seems like the same document that we heard was exactly the same one that then gets passed on to board supervisors. And it's not clear that what the final thing that's presented is something that ever comes back to us and we said, well, yes, that's exactly what we meant. Good job. And so that's just a point of concern for me.
I think we can take that down, and thank you for letting us know.
Was the document that went to the planning commission the same that went to the board? Like there were no changes in between?
That is correct, and we did raise that issue, and
Yeah.
there was discussion about we want to get feedback based on the same that the PC heard, but it's still going around.
Yeah.
So, but there was discussion about that and that concern at the time.
How do we address that? So I think.
It's an evolution, for
Yeah,
sure.
so phase
It's
two
still
is
going
sort
on.
of, is continuing to evolve. So phase one is not like, that's not like it's chapter one of the comp plan. It's phase one is sort of a setup for, to sort of set the frame for conversations for phase two, which is what we're launching right now.
It's just confusing that it was categorized as planning for growth, but the document that was produced was not a plan for how to plan for growth. So, there's this framework on equity and so forth, but it wasn't really, when you set out to say this is what we're going to achieve, the document that's produced doesn't really reflect what the state objectives were in the first place.
I think there was also some confusion. I was confused getting a list of options. It made it feel like they were sort of predetermined options of menu, and I was picking from them like, do we do this or do this? I was like, wait a minute, I thought the plan was to kind of figure out what we're doing. So I think that was a little bit tricky. And I think obviously one thing that we're hearing from a number of different folks, and this is maybe something too in terms of thinking about the presentations like the other CCs and the groups, is a clearer sense of exactly what's going to happen each phase. I think there's still a lot of confusion as to like where we are in the process and what has been sort of set in stone and what is still evolving.
Yeah.
And even like Eric's question about like, what is that final build out number? Like when in the process do we, because as I recall, like the build out analysis has a range, right? It's scenarios. It's not like one number, it's scenarios. But at some point, right, somebody has to like pick what scenario you're working for, or saying, this is the one that we are sort of assuming is the correct one, and like when does that get chosen? Or do you go with the full build out scenario, or do you go with the lesser? Like at what point, somebody's gonna have to, and is gonna have to vote, somebody's gonna have to pick and say, that's the one we're going with. So I think just an understanding of when some of those decisions, like you say, are sort of set in stone versus something that's, no, this is still malleable, but at some point, when is like the drop dead date when these decisions are actually going to be made? You think?
Yeah, so the next year is really, again, just sort of getting, like, having those conversations at a more refined level around topics. And so, like, there are no decisions right now. This is really just getting the feedback on the table. And I think that will help us understand of the scenarios, you know, where should we kind of be targeting.
I think that's extremely, thank you. I think that's very helpful to hear.
So,
And then.
You go first, Council.
okay, so the other thing is there a way to get this information and to the other members of the board? Because what we had happen in the past was, you're just one voice, and clearly how Crozet was envisioned by the rest of the Board of Supervisors was overwhelmingly different than it was envisioned by the residents of Crozet and even you. So how does this message get to those folks? Because we really have no control over, we have contact with you, we have no control over what they impose upon us.
I think that it's very important for people to come to the board now and then. I mean, the reason we're in this building today is because for 18 months, 2 or 3 different people came to every meeting and said, with posters and whatever, we had a library that you said we were going to get in 1988, and it opened in 2013. So this is very important. And someone asked about how we get our input, contacting the board members. You can bos@alma.org, you can send it to me and I will forward it on. This is the reason it took 5 years for the last update is because it's a big, important document, and philosophically, it's really important to me, and I hope that it will be important to citizens who read it, because the existing one, I'm sure there's a copy here somewhere in the library, and if not, I'll bring mine over, is that you can learn about how we got where we are today, and there are always going to be things that didn't get right the last time, and it's a continually evolving thing every 5 years or so. Back to the 80s when I started attending, it was usually a chapter at a time. So the rural area was done one time and then a couple of other smaller ones. But the 2010 to 2015 effort was assembling the stack of notebooks that was this tall into one 400-page document. But each one of them has sometimes conflicting goals with others, which is something that was avoided on purpose, is having that fist fight because of the constituency on the board at the time. But these are really important things, and the numbers issue is important because the community has the responsibility and the right to decide what kind of community we're going to be, the county. So I hope that all of you will think about that, and do you want to just be the place where whatever, welcome all comers, basically, we're just going to become Fairfax. Because it won't be long. I mean, it was only 20 years between when Fairfax was farms and when it wasn't. So those are kinds of philosophical discussions that really have to take place. And I really hope that you all will share your thoughts, because I need the ammunition to go with what I've been saying all along, and people are tired of hearing it. So I need those other arguments and ammo to help with that. And yeah, the quality of life for the citizens, that's what's our job to figure out, all of us together, because we are the community.
I think Tom's, you're Tom, right?
Yep.
Tom's questionnaire, like, answer, I mean, it's only 100 people, but maybe if we could disperse, you know,
it will keep growing, I'm
something
sure,
like
yeah.
that to get a bigger response, like that is the community response, right? Well, for that particular, those questions.
Costas, if I could answer your question, I would answer it with a suggestion. We've tried it, but it never worked. The fact is that there are 2 different classes of citizens in Albemarle County, rural and growth area. The development area holds, all the weight of growth and development on it. The only way we should do it is have all the CACs, the chairs, meet on a regular basis and come up with an action agenda for all of the CACs, that all of us, all the problems that we share. Because if we try and do this individually, we've gotten nowhere. Look what happened over in Village of Ravenna. the entire committee resigned. You know, and this, the only way we can do this is if we do this together. We've tried this as a community. There's been no other community as local as Crozet for the last 30 years. We did it, we were the first one in 1993 to come up with a plan for the community. In 2000, we were the first one to do a master plan, you know. We thought we had an agreement with the county about that as far as the build out. And it was very interesting because if you look, and I was talking about the population numbers, I think the fact that we're gonna be 25% or greater over what the consultants recommended, to me proves that those consultants in 2000, when they said the ideal population for Crozet should be about 12,000, were really correct, you know. Now, was everything done that should have been done with our master plan? No. Like, maybe the county can answer where the 300 affordable homes that should have been profit went to. Under the 15% affordable housing, where did they go? We got 20, according to the Gazette, we got 23 affordable housing units out of it. You know.
We need to transition. We have a discussion portion. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for that. I'm sorry, we'll go last comment and then we'll move to
It's
discussion.
just a process question. Who is responsible for preparing the material that goes to the board for the board to take action on? Because they don't seem to be listening to the people in this room. So who is it? Is it the bureaucrats? Who is it that is preparing things for you to take action on it?
Well, it's a staff effort, and they're reflecting.
So it's the staff that's...
But they're reflecting what they've heard at various intervals.
Well, they're not reflecting what's happening in this, in any other meeting I've come to. So something's wrong about the material you're getting at the board to take decisions on.
Well, when we have legislative projects where there are rezonings and special permits approval, that's the process I'm talking about. This, where there are very detailed staff reports. For this evolutionary process, I don't know that we've had CAC by CAC feedbacks about the different questions. But this is, as painful as this is, it is really just beginning.
But it's not working yet.
Well, it hasn't hardly had a chance to get started yet as far as getting to the meat of the issue, so I want you to be patient.
So we need to move to the discussion
About
portion.
competency of
We need to move to the discussion portion. And I just want to reiterate that as Emily, as Allison mentioned before, Allison, do you mind pulling up, are you able to pull up that questionnaire, the GFAC 44 page up?
I can pull it up. Look at the URL.
Yeah, just the
Oh,
URL.
Oh, yeah.
So like the one, so, you know, we're all sitting around talking, we can talk in this room, but it doesn't necessarily leave this room, but
That's the way.
that right there has literally a questionnaire that asks lots of questions about how you feel and what you want to see. And that information goes directly to the planning staff who are writing this plan.
So can we add a question? Do you feel the Crozet master plan was reflective of the input of the community of Crozet? Because do you all want to hear that?
We're talking about
Right, but if
comp
they didn't
plan.
listen to us in the master plan, why the hell are they gonna listen to us in this AC 44 plan?
So
They didn't listen to us. No one here wanted it, and it was shoved down our throats. So add that question to the public engagement and get the response and give it to the board so they can know what the people actually think.
Are we gonna continue the meeting now?
You can do whatever you want.
Okay. We're gonna move to the discussion portion, and I think you want to talk about the community chat kits as well?
Yes, so one of the things that we're doing in this phase, it happened a little bit in the last phase, but not, I don't think it was utilized as much. And with the different presentations going on in the larger working group, one of the new opportunities is this community chat kit, which is actually going to be released next week on the website after the working group meeting on Monday. Things need to still be finalized a little bit more with some of that before the working group meeting, but this will give it will be a distributed engagement model basically. So it's a tool with that will provide information for you as individuals to be able to do community meetings with your different community groups or neighborhood associations or friends where you can share your thoughts and suggestions for the future of the county. And they'll be launched, like I said, next week. And this is kind of the first iteration of it. It will include some kind of intro, kind of where we are now, probably cleaned up somewhat from what you all saw today. And there will be kind of 5 high-level questions. One of them is how do you want to get around the county in 2044? For example, do you want to be able to walk, bike, drive, take transit? What would need to happen for you to be able to do that? If you think about the next 20 years and like 2044, that's kind of the high level number there. So with the community kits, you will get, you will have the question, or it's available if you didn't grab one, but over on the table, you can write your personal answer down, and with the kits, what will happen is you can send out the questions ahead of time to people and fill it out, and then when you meet together, you can discuss. So if you guys want to take maybe 3 to 5 minutes to kind of think about this question for yourself and either write it down or hold it, and then we can kind of discuss in general the answer to this question. And I think we have a little bit of time still, so maybe 2 to 3 minutes for this one. But if you were doing this with the actual community chat kit, there would be 5 questions, and you would kind of do it beforehand and then discuss them at your meeting. So if you guys want to answer them. Yes, Ann.
While people are thinking, just technically, I used one of the earlier versions, or tried to. It was so big that I couldn't download it in my rural broadband. So think about that capability for people who can maybe get 2 or 3 megs. I mean, it was like 8 or 10. And so I just
very
said,
good.
never mind, I can't do it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And can I ask the supervisor a question? I went to a zoning modernization meeting on 1:30, and in that meeting, they're talking about overhauling the entire ordinances in the county with a timeline of 3 years. And they're talking about, reducing waivers, reviewing the model neighborhood district. One, why do we need a review and modernization of our zoning ordinances unless there's a big change in the wind? And 2, how much is this costing us for consultants?
I don't think it is consultants. The reason that it's taking a long time is because the legal department has been going chapter by chapter.
They hired a consultant.
So, okay, well, up until now, anyway, we have been working on various other elements of it. Before Greg Campbell retired, he was taking on 1 chapter at a time. Lots has changed from the General Assembly over the years, and we have to update our regulations to conform with whatever the General Assembly does to us, usually taking effect in July of the year. So there are built-in conflicts and things that have happened over time. A lot of our ordinances have old ways of describing things that were fine or understood in the 1980s, but they're much more clean, crisp descriptions that have been written into these modernized ones. It's not changing the elements of it necessarily, but making it much more understandable, and fewer cross-references. Go first to page 3 and then to 200 and then back to 12. It's basically organized in one place so people can find the information they're actually looking for. That's the goal. It's not to sweep up all the rules and bring in new things. There may be some discussion about changing some of the processes. If it's something that has been approved by previous boards for 10 years automatically, then maybe that's something where there should be a performance standard that staff can respond to instead of having things go to public hearings. But having the public engagement elements is always going to be really important to me, so we'll be watching very carefully.
Yeah, just to comment on that too. I know it came up at our last planning commission, last National Heritage Committee meeting about that very document.
Okay.
And, the very process, not document. I mean, and one of the concerns that we have is typically what happens, you have a comprehensive plan, you have your goals and strategies developed, and then the ordinances flow out of those goals and strategies. But since we won't have completed the comprehensive plan before that modernization effort is done, they'll be out of sync between our goals and strategies in the comprehensive plan and this modernization. I mean, there's some of the things that really seem like we should, for example, the Natural Resources chapter, which the Natural Heritage Committee discussed, we need to have that conversation about natural resources and what our goals and objectives are, so that we know what we want to prioritize in terms of ordinances and so forth. If you don't have that conversation first, and you just come up with, these changes, it's.
I know
doesn't
there
seem-
was a discussion a couple of years ago about doing one then the other. And there was a evaluation by, I think, everybody at the time, that very careful parallel track, talking back and forth, was going to work, rather than making half the people mad by waiting 5 more years before we even start, because things always do take longer. I mean, the 2015 update ended up taking 5 years, so that we can expect. I would think it's highly unlikely that the zoning thing is going to be finished before we're ready to have a really well-drafted document for the comp plan. But I certainly will have written that down, and I will certainly find out more about how that's going to work going forward. Thank you.
I was just thinking, I think we need to work out those details and not get too, cart the full horse on that process.
I think we're about to finish up our discussion, and we'll wrap up with more topics.
Yeah, to save a little time, I think if you want to share your answer, maybe we can do 1 or 2, but if you'd like to write it down. So part of what this is an introduction to this community chat kit, kind of which will, like I said, be online on the website, I think on next week after the work group meeting, Tuesday or Wednesday, where you can kind of post your own meetings to get feedback. These questions are a little different than the ones that are on the current questionnaire that's available, but they're a little broader in the sense that in case we're reaching different people or the same people, you can answer them. And this is one of them around kind of transportation. Obviously, how do I get around in the county? But like I said, this will be available online, and you can either print it off or pick it up in the county office building and send it back, or scan them in and email them back if you have that option as well. So I don't know if anybody wanted to share 1 or 2 kind of quickly, so we can move on to the last couple things. But if you have a specific answer to this question and you'd like to share it, we can maybe hear from 2 people at this point.
Karen, shit. Well, I would say my e-bike, but I'll be 90 years old. I don't know.
You, sir, in the back, and then you, ma'am, in the best.
When you get all this chat information and people filling out forms, are you going to report, like Don reported, percentage for, percentage against, and make it public, so we can see actually what the community wants, and not just what the staff thinks the community wants?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the full plan is for reporting out, but we do plan to, after each phase, to report out what the feedback was from that phase. So whether it was like the survey, if you look at the questionnaire currently, I think it asks you to, I think it's ranking what's important to you. You can actually, if you scroll to the bottom, you can start it without actually doing it. But I think it asks you to rank various types of transportation for like the first one. If you just literally click save and continue.
Why not get like an Esri dashboard that everyone's using and has a live feed with what the...
Well, we're still pretty high level, and it's really kind of about like what in general do you see? I mentioned before too a little bit with like the next couple parts of this phase, and even in phase 3, it'll get a lot more specific. And so like with the goals, objectives, and strategies, like the goals are really high level. If you look at the current comprehensive plan, some of them are even like follow kind of state law to some extent, but the strategies are really the things that are like very specific and talk about specific action items or projects. So we're still kind of high level to kind of get those goals and objectives, but that will be discussed later. So, ma'am, I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's really just a comment. When we talk about strategies and we talk about 2044, I have trouble because, right now it's 2023 and transportation in and around Crozet is a real problem. Already it's hard for me to even think what it's going to be like 20 years from now when there are so many issues with transportation right now. So how do we begin even to look at it now as opposed to thinking 20 years ahead. What's happening right now? How can we improve what we have and see maybe some specific plans to unfold in the next 5 to 10 years as opposed to 20 years from now?
And not to make this conversation go a ton longer, but can you talk a little bit more about like what the issues that you're seeing now are?
Well, sure, primarily it's the numbers of cars in our small community and very little build out in terms of roads. We all know that Eastern Avenue is a dream, but it's been a dream for, you know, many, many years. And the only real new road that I'm aware of is Old Trail Drive connecting Jarman's Gap to 250. In 30 years, I've seen a bunch of traffic lights, but I haven't seen really good infrastructure to help with the amount of cars that are traveling around in Crozet. And the other thing is, like, public transportation is great, and I love the, you know, the Crozet connection van, and I think that that's working, but people still like their cars, and we haven't addressed how people can continue to like their cars and have good access to 64 and Charlottesville, because that's where the jobs are too. I mean, there will be more jobs in Crozet eventually, but right now, we still haven't addressed the issue of car travel and automotive numbers here. So how do we project, how do we even look at it 20 years from now?
Yeah, and Allison, one of the things I think that relates to this is probably the discussion that came up last time about the kids walking across the street, and all that had to do with the fact that there's too much traffic on 250, and parents will go into Old Trail to pick up their kids or something. So I think that's a symptom of a larger problem, and I think that's a perfect example of where there's an issue. For example, you know, it's folks are worried about their children because of the traffic that's on 250. And so how do we address that in some way?
The first phase of the plan was planned for growth, but the first phase of the plan should have been planned for the growth that already happened, that we didn't plan for.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, Allison. And so I think, you know, one of the lessons that we're hearing here is that we are still fairly early, even though I think we were right, Lonnie was right. I think we hear that phase one is over and we feel like we've missed the boat somehow, right? So some of us feel like we missed our chance to weigh in. But what we're hearing tonight is that we are still at a very high level and there is still lots of opportunity for input. So I would just again plug what Allison described before, going to the Engage Albemarle AC 44 site and doing that questionnaire and providing as much input as you can at this stage. That's very critical.
I think I'm correct that also all of the feedback files from earlier things are available somewhere on the website.
Yeah, thank you.
So you can catch up as if you were in the room.
Yeah.
I couldn't like process
So,
that.
when you go to the AC44 page, it puts you on phase 2 because that's where we're at. But there's a link at the I think it's the top. There's a link somewhere on that page that says phase 1.
Okay.
And phase 1, you can go back and look at all the stuff from phase 1. You can also pull up all of the survey questionnaire results from phase 1 verbatim. So you can read all of the comments that people put in and how they ranked things in the ranking questions. So we do try to be really transparent about the feedback that we receive. Typically, all of that will also get provided to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors as they're doing their decision making as we get to those points in the process. And then we will often also, because sometimes the volume is just so large, develop some thematic summaries of here's some of the high-level things that we heard. But we do strive to put out the verbatim comments as well, because we know that folks want to make sure that we are summarizing the high-level feedback accurately. And so that you can go back and look at all that from phase 1, and we will continue to do that as we go through the process.
One last question. Is there already a paper reference file here at the library?
I don't believe so.
Because I think there's still a
But
lot
we
of people who
certainly
would love to have that, even just to sit down at a table and look at it. I mean, I'm trying to make one at home and it's already like this thick. So that would be ideal.
Yeah, we can take that back. And I know they have copies of the master plan at the library for sure, but we can look at how we can get the comp plan stuff in here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Allison was pulling up here this raw data. You can actually
So
open up
like
these
these
PDFs.
are comments, 97 pages of comments from the date they were received. And the survey responses are here by percentage from the 2 surveys that were done, or 2 questionnaires, I keep saying surveys, but questionnaires, 2 questionnaires that were done in the first phase. So when we started moving kind of to step 2, the feedback from this first step in phase 2 will be available. The pop-ups, the working group, if there's an email feedback received, that will all be available, similar to how this feedback is here.
I know that, Emily, when we did the Crozet master plan, incorporates a whole section on sort of feedback and what was heard and kind of, or at least there's appendices and things that summarize this. I assume that with the comp plan, there's probably a plan to do a similar thing, like in an abbreviated fashion, probably not all 97 pages, but some abbreviated fashion that summarizes some of this information in there.
Absolutely.
About the comments.
Well,
Eric,
Yeah, this is, I think it's a good discussion, and yeah, I'd like to make a suggestion, maybe for improvement from this group. So I think the common theme I'm hearing from myself, from Lonnie, from others, is that we come to these meetings and other forums like the website, we do engage, but then we don't see follow-up action or documentation. You know, it's not easy to come out to this meeting on a Wednesday night. So my suggestion and question, I guess, is what about all this in-person feedback? Besides us all individually going to the website, how do we capture everything that was talked about tonight in a comprehensive set of minutes and make sure that it receives red lines and comments from the board as a regular course of business from this meeting, rather than asking everybody to go home and do more homework? This has been an outstanding back and forth, and I think it could be captured and responded to systematically.
So I think that's a great question, because this is something I'd raised before, and I know that it was super early. This is something I'd raised like with Rachel Falkenstein before about wanting to do this presentation, and we talked about that, like wanting to have a presentation like this earlier. I think, if I'm going to take Eric in a slightly different direction, because when we did the Crozet master plan, right, we had planning staff come, right, for each chapter, and we would have a whole meeting on land use, right, and we would talk about land use stuff. And then they wrote the chapter, and then they came back, and we all read the text, and we talked about it, and we worked on it, right? We had iterative feedback opportunities where we were really engaged. Like, we had meetings where every single chapter, we had a whole meeting devoted to just that, and we gave feedback. Maybe not every.
And what
Every
happened?
chapter. What?
And what happened?
Right, and then they came, well, you're right. I mean, it was,
Thank
look, well, Tom, they came back, and sometimes they made changes, sometimes they changed things, sometimes they moved things around, they changed wording and other things, and sometimes they didn't. But we had that opportunity, but I think that's what Eric's, I mean, at a minimum, what Eric's talking about is the opportunity to do that. So I think that's, to the extent that there's an opportunity for that in phase 2, right, I think that is what, like, this group or other groups would really love an opportunity to really sit down and have a real targeted discussion on some of these chapters. Maybe not all of them, but on some of them.
Yeah.
Do you think that's feasible, Emily, or is that?
Well, and so that's where the comprehensive plan is countywide, right? And so it becomes a real challenge to do, with the resources that we have and the timeline that we have to do this project in, to do that every single chapter, every single CAC, and there's a lot of people who don't come to CAC meetings, so that's why we have the different opportunities that we have set up.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're asking for your help in helping drive folks to the tools that we have set up so that we can get all the feedback and kind of capture it in one place. So that's why the pop-ups sort of are centered around helping people get to taking those questionnaires so that those questionnaires have all of the feedback that we receive. I think one of the things that's been a challenge over the years is that if folks are emailing the planning staff, and they're emailing the planning commission, and they're emailing the board of supervisors, everybody has different access to those channels, and so getting them all together can just be hard. And so the idea is to have some focused channels to sort of direct the feedback into, so that we can make sure that we're catching everything and able to look at it all together. we wanted to try, this is the first time that we've done something like this where we have sort of, what we were trying to do was sort of try out this chat kit idea here tonight, in the hopes that that would inspire you all to then go back to your HOAs and your run club and the trails crew, and sort of do that conversation there that again helps to sort of just funnel feedback back to the county's main channels. Because it's hard to talk to 112,000 people at once. And I think staff did work really hard to try to be as responsive and available as possible, but it is hard to do chapter by chapter, that many times in all different settings. And so to the extent that we can get folks to help us sort of collect feedback in a couple of places that we kind of put out is really helpful.
So it sounds like no. But I would just put a plug.
And we do have a public engagement plan that was approved by the board that sort of sets out this framework of.
Yeah, I know. I think people appreciated, I know, Tom, your point's taken about what the feedback actually ended up doing to the plan and what the substance plan was, but in terms of process, I think people appreciated the opportunity to talk about it chapter by chapter, review the chapter, talk to planning staff. And I understand that there's a different plan, but I think that's what we were hoping to have an opportunity to do.
Let me say, I don't disagree with you about the way we did the master plan. I think, that's back and forth. What I object to was that we made our voices heard, we voted on it, it went to the board, and what did the board do? They scolded the committee for having the audacity to vote. How else can you, as a community, I'll give you an example. For me, as far as, I'll take the expansion of the rural area. I don't think that should be a board decision. That should be a referendum decision by the whole county. We've already invested over $350 million, as far as I can see, in rural protection. Money well invested. But I don't want 6 people, to make that kind of decision. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying there's got to be a better way. I think as far as sending all these things to the community, but I think in the end, there's got to be some kind of vote. It's bigger than 6 people, what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And there's a government in this county who has already proved that they don't care what the community says, and they bypass the government process that we've had for 30 years of having a vote by the planning commission, the board, and general input on an issue. That's my objection.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to have to leave it there because we do want.
Will that be entered into the minutes? John's comment go into the minutes, please?
Michael's got minutes here. And we have reporting, of course, thanks to the Gazette and the wonderful reporting. I do just want to, because we have 4 more minutes before we have to clean up the room. I just want to give a quick update. This is going to be quicker, the committee business. I want to provide a quick update. Last time we had Mallory was kind enough to offer to help with website issues. I saw you had an email there. I don't know if you were able to identify any issues and pass them along.
Yeah, the main issues were the initial search through whatever search engine you choose is not really well established. You don't even get the county website's link on the first page using Google or Bing. What you do get though is the CCA's website comes right to the top, which I think is, and that's how I've always found the CCAC's website is you go to CCA and then there's a link there that can send you over to the county's website. But I think improving that would be useful, and just making sure that the county's CCAC link makes it at least to the first page of search results. And then I found, I think, 3 links that didn't work, but I just made notes of them and sent them over to Allison.
Thank you. And Michael was working on our development update. So on Eric's point about kind of staying on top of things and seeing where things are, this is one of our goals now, is to make sure that we're being a little more follow through on development projects and keeping abreast of where things are. And Michael was helpful enough to go back through the last few years of our meetings, about a dozen development projects that we've seen community meetings for. He's assembled them in a spreadsheet. I'm gonna work with Allison to figure out the best way to sort of actually track those. Allison is a guru at, what's the kind of county view, and how to track all those development projects, which is not super easy to do, but Allison knows, and she's gonna help us, give us a little tutorial either maybe next month or the following month. And then we're gonna sort of my hope is that we can all sort of each pick one development that we'll just keep our eyes on, that we can keep people updated where things are. If there's a new meeting at the planning commission or board of supervisors, whatever's going on, we can just know where we are in the process. Virtual meeting practices, we don't even talk about. Yeah, we'll talk more about that next time. So I don't have anything else.
Apply to join the committee.
Yes, I actually, oh, sorry, that's where I want to go. If you go to government and go to boards and commissions, you scroll down, don't get confused because the first ones are actually not us. We're actually in the second set in alphabetical order. Go down to Crozet Community Advisory Committee, and right there, you can, oh, sorry, committee, I'm sorry, what?
Committee info and roster on the resources side.
Oh, here you go. Oh, committee info roster, and then you can apply right there.
Right there, over there in the corner, you're not looking.
Yeah. Yeah. No, sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to let folks know that the Crozet Community Association meeting is next month, and we will have a repeat of this presentation. So we will be working with Tom Loach and Emily and others, and Allison and others, to make sure that meeting is productive. Also, if you can't remember anything else, the CCA website you talked about is crozetcommunity.org, and that has a link to the county website, and a link to the AC44, and has this meeting's agenda, and we'll have the Crozet Gazette's video link there as soon as they put it up.
Anything else from anybody on the committee? Any other committee business or announcements or updates? All right, thank you to the committee members, thank you to our county staff, thank you to the public for attending. With that, I believe we are adjourned. Thanks everyone.